I'll never forget the night it all started. The night a simple knock at our front door turned my world upside down. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter after dinner. I heard it. A loud, sharp rap, like someone was trying to break the door down. I froze. It was late and the street outside was quiet. The kind of quiet that usually meant nothing ever happened. But this felt different. My heart started racing before I even moved. "Mom," Emma's voice came from the living room. My daughter had just finished her evening workout. Sweat still glistening on her forehead, her hair pulled into a tight braid. Normally, she'd be talking about school or her day, but there was a tension in her voice I couldn't ignore. "I don't know," I whispered, trying to sound calm even though my stomach had turned to ice. "Just wait." I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. What I saw made my breath catch. A man was standing there, wearing a uniform that looked official, almost like a police officer, but not quite. A badge clipped to his chest, a gun at his side, and eyes that didn't just look at me. They assessed, judged, and threatened all at once. His expression was hard, cold, like he was used to being obeyed. "HOA officer," I muttered under my breath. Our neighborhood had its rules, and we'd had disagreements before. But this, pointing a gun, bout was something else entirely. Emma appeared behind me, her posture calm, almost unnervingly so. She didn't panic, didn't rush me. She simply stood there, eyes steady on the door, and whispered, "Don't worry, Mom, I've got this." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, but the tension in the air made it impossible. "You've got this," I whispered back. My voice shook. "There's a gun. He's dangerous." She didn't flinch. She just nodded, still watching the man through the glass. "Stay behind me," she said softly. I hesitated, torn between fear and trust. Emma had always been strong, even when she was little. She was the kind of person who stood up for herself, even when the odds were against her. But this was different. This was a grown man with a weapon, someone who had clearly crossed every line of decency. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. And then came a voice, sharp and commanding. "Open the door. We need to discuss the fence immediately." I felt a cold wave of panic wash over me. The fence. That was it. This man was threatening us, pointing a gun over a fence dispute. My chest tightened. I knew the HOA could be aggressive, but I had never imagined it could escalate to this dot. Emma moved slightly, positioning herself between me and the door, calm and collected. "Sir," she said, her voice low but steady, "you need to step back and leave before this gets out of hand." I couldn't see the man's reaction clearly, but I could hear the tension in his breathing. He was caught off guard by what? I couldn't tell. My heart pounded so loudly I thought he might hear it. "Step back?" He scoffed. "Do you know who you're talking to?" "I enforce the rules here. Open the door now." Emma didn't move. She didn't argue either. There was a strange stillness about her, a quiet authority that made the man pause, even just slightly. I realized in that moment that Emma wasn't just my daughter. There was something else, something I had never fully understood, hidden beneath her calm exterior. I swallowed hard. "Emma, what do we do?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. She glanced at me, a flicker of something I hadn't seen before in her eyes. Experience? Confidence. A skill honed over years I hadn't even known about. "Trust me," she said, simply. The man knocked again, harder this time, the gun now visible as he leaned forward. My stomach dropped. I wanted to scream, to call for help, to do anything, but Emma raised a hand. Just a small motion. And somehow it seemed to stop him in his tracks. That's when I realized this was no ordinary teenager, no ordinary daughter I had raised. She had control over a situation I couldn't even begin to manage. I didn't know how she had learned it, didn't know what she was capable of. But I felt, deep in my bones, that she could handle this. That maybe, just maybe, we were going to survive the night unscathed, because Emma was ready for more than just a confrontation over a fence. And yet, the tension outside the door was suffocating. The man's patience was thinning. I knew this wasn't over. Whatever had started as an ordinary HOA disagreement was about to spiral into something I had never imagined in by the time it ended. Nothing about our lives would be the same. The knocking didn't stop. If anything, it grew louder, angrier. Like the man outside thought he could intimidate us into obedience. I gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white, feeling my heart hammer in my chest. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to hide, to call someone, anyone, but Emma's calm presence anchored me. "Mom," she said quietly, "stay behind me and don't move." I nodded, though my mind was racing. The fear in me was a sharp, physical ache. I could hear the man muttering through the door, something about rules and enforcement, but I couldn't make out all of it. The tone alone was enough. Arrogant, aggressive, convinced of his authority. My stomach twisted. Emma shifted slightly, her hand brushing mine for a brief, reassuring touch. "He doesn't know who he's dealing with," she whispered. Her words were strange, half warning, half confidence, but I didn't understand them. I just knew that whatever she meant, it was serious. Then, without warning, the door rattled violently as he slammed against it. The gun at his side was now fully visible, the kind of presence that froze me in place. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My throat felt tight, as if the fear itself was choking me. Emma stepped forward, and for a second I felt sheer panic. She was only inches from him, and yet she didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice either. Instead, she spoke in a tone so calm, so commanding, that it made me catch my breath. "Sir," she said, "you need to step away right now. You're overstepping. This is not your fight." The man froze. I saw it in his eye, shocked disbelief, confusion. He hadn't expected resistance. Not this kind of resistance. My daughter wasn't arguing, wasn't panicking. She wasn't acting like a frightened civilian. She was standing her ground, and suddenly I realized she was trained for this. "Trained," I whispered to myself, heart thundering. I had no idea. All these years I'd known Emma as my sweet, determined daughter. But now, facing a grown man with a gun, she was something else entirely. Something dangerous? The man's voice shook slightly as he said, I'm just enforcing the rules. Rules don't give you the right to threaten us." Emma interrupted, sharper this time. Her gaze didn't waver from his, and her presence radiated authority. I could feel it like a physical force, something I had never experienced before. Even from my position, I felt almost protected, as if nothing could touch us while she was here. He stumbled backward, almost tripping on the welcome mat, his arrogance cracking under the weight of her calm. Then came a longer pause, the kind that stretches for a heartbeat and makes you wonder if the world has stopped just to watch what happens next. I clutched the edge of the counter, trying to steady myself. "Emma, who are you?" I asked, barely able to speak. Her eyes flicked toward me for a moment, just enough to let me know she was aware of my fear, but in control. "Not who he thinks I am," she said simply. Then she turned her attention back to him. The man's hands shook slightly as he adjusted his gun, though I could see the hesitation now. Something had changed. He no longer looked confident. No longer looked certain. I realized, with a chill, that Emma's calm wasn't just confidence, it was experience. Real, trained, battle-tested experience for a moment. It felt like the world had shrunk to just the three of us. Me, Emma, and this man who had underestimated her completely. I didn't know what she was capable of, but I could feel the tension. In the air, the kind that makes every second stretch into an eternity. "Step away," she said again, low and steady. Now and then something unexpected happened. He laughed nervously, a forced, shaky sound, as if trying to cover his fear. You're kidding, right? You can't." Emma didn't answer. She just shifted her weight slightly, and the quiet authority in her stance said more than words ever could. I felt it deep in my chest. This was no ordinary teenager. This was someone trained to survive, to dominate, to protect. My protective instincts as a mother screamed at me, but another part of me, The part that had always admired her strength relaxed slightly. I didn't know what would happen next. Would he leave? Would he escalate? The tension was suffocating, every second stretching into an eternity. And as I watched Emma stand there unflinching, I realized the world outside had no idea who they were dealing with. And that thought, that terrifying, thrilling thought, made my blood run cold. The silence after Emma's command felt like it stretched for hours, though I knew it was only seconds. I could hear my own heartbeat, thudding so loud it almost drowned out the sound of the man shuffling outside. He wasn't just hesitant, he was scared now. I could see it in the way his hand trembled over the gun, the way his eyes darted from Emma to me and back again. And for the first time, I wondered if he realized he had made a grave mistake. "Step away from the door," Emma said again. Her voice still calm, but carrying an edge that made me shiver. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." The man's lips twitched, like he was trying to laugh off his fear, but it came out as a bark of uncertainty. I'm just enforcing the rules," he stammered. This is my duty." Emma cut him off with a single, sharp movement. She shifted her stance slightly, and though she didn't raise her voice, the air around her seemed to tighten, as if gravity itself had changed. "Duty doesn't give you the right to point a gun at anyone. Not your neighbor. Not my mother. Not me. Step back or this ends badly for you." I could feel the tension thickening in the room. I wanted to scream at him to tell him to leave, but Emma's presence was magnetic. I felt like I had no right to interfere. My role as a mother had been eclipsed by something far stronger, far more dangerous, and I had to trust her, then, in a move that made my stomach drop. The man leaned forward, gun still in hand, and said, "I don't think you understand." Emma's eyes locked on his, icy and unyielding. "Try me," she said, almost softly. His hand faltered. The confidence that had carried him to our doorstep evaporated in an instant. I realized he had no idea what she meant, no idea what she was capable of. A shiver ran down my spine as the truth sank in. My daughter wasn't just strong. She was trained for moments like this. She had trained people to survive situations far worse than a neighborhood dispute. And now all that experience was focused on protecting us. Look, he stuttered, panic creeping into his voice. "I just want to do my job." "Please," Emma's gaze didn't leave his. "Your job isn't threatening a woman in her home, and it sure as hell isn't pointing a gun at a teenager. Step back, now, or this situation will end in a way you'll regret for the rest of your life." His face went pale. I could almost see the thought process behind his eyes. I underestimated her. I don't know what she can do. Every instinct in me screamed at him to leave, but I could see he was trapped in his own fear. And then the moment shifted. He made a move, small, but enough to make my pulse spike. He adjusted the gun almost unconsciously, and I thought that was it. I thought he would fire and the world would shatter in a single moment. But Emma, calm and precise, raised her hand just slightly, almost like a signal I couldn't understand. The man froze mid-motion, as if invisible chains had held him in place. "Stop," she said, her voice low, but carrying the weight of someone who had faced life-and-death situations countless times. "You will not harm anyone tonight. Not me, not my mother, not anyone." He staggered back, finally realizing he had crossed a line he couldn't return from. His knees wobbled slightly, and he muttered something about procedures and rules, but the words were hollow. He knew, in some instinctual part of himself, that he was outmatched. I wanted to speak, to say something. Anything, but Emma shook her head at me, almost imperceptibly. "Stay quiet, watch." And I did. I could only watch as my daughter, the girl I thought I knew, became someone entirely new before my eyes, a protector, a warrior. Someone I couldn't even begin to understand. Then, just when I thought the tension couldn't grow anymore, he took a step forward again, desperate, reckless. "You don't scare me," he barked, trying to reclaim authority, but it was weak, desperate. Emma's eyes narrowed. Her calm shifted into something colder, sharper. "Do you really want to find out what happens when you underestimate someone? I promise you, you do not." Her words weren't a threat, they were a fact. And he knew it. For the first time, I saw him hesitate entirely. The gun wavered in his hand. His facade of authority cracked completely, leaving raw fear exposed. And in that moment, I realized how close we had come to disaster and how much Emma's presence had changed everything. I wanted to run forward, to hug her, to scream at the man, but I stayed frozen. I couldn't interfere with what was unfolding. I didn't fully understand it, but I trusted it. And in the shadows of that doorway, I realized the horrifying truth. This man didn't just threaten us. He had triggered something in my daughter that had been forged in ways I couldn't imagine. And that terrified me even more than the gun itself. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until I felt my lungs burn. The man outside, the so-called HOA cop, was frozen, his face pale, the gun now shaking slightly in his hand. He was still trying to act in control, but the confidence was gone, completely shattered. I had never seen him like this before, and a small part of me felt a thrill of vindication. But mostly, I felt fear. Fear of what could happen if he made even one wrong move. Emma didn't flinch. She stood like a statue, calm, controlled, but there was an edge to her now, a force that was impossible to ignore. I realized then that this wasn't just about him pointing a gun. This was about him underestimating her, and he was about to learn the hard way exactly what he had done. Then, without warning, he raised the gun slightly as if to prove he still had authority. "Step aside," he barked, his voice cracking under pressure. "I am enforcing the rules. You can't stop me." Emma's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought she might finally raise her voice, finally escalate the confrontation. But instead, she did something I didn't expect. She stepped forward slowly, deliberately, closing the distance between her and the door. I could see him flinch. Even at this distance, he could feel her presence. It was like watching a predator approach another predator, calm, precise, and terrifying in its inevitability. "You think rules make you safe?" she said, her voice steady and chilling. "You think authority gives you power? But you don't know me. You don't know what I've done, what I can do. And you are not leaving here tonight with that gun pointed at anyone in this house." I couldn't breathe. Part of me wanted to scream at her to stop, to step back, to de-escalate. But I knew somewhere deep down that if she wasn't in control, I wouldn't even be able to stop him from crossing the line. Then it happened. He stumbled backward, tripped on the threshold, and for a terrifying second, the gun went off. The sound was deafening in the quiet of the night. I ducked instinctively, but nothing hit us. A bullet had slammed into the doorframe, splintering the wood with a loud crack. My heart leaped into my throat. "Enough," Emma shouted, her calm broken for the first time, her voice sharp like steel. "Drop the gun, now." He froze again, his panic reaching a peak. The fear in his eyes was raw, almost palpable. He looked around, realizing that the situation had completely spiraled out of his control. And then something even more shocking happened. He lowered the gun slowly, almost as if he had no choice. But as he did, he muttered something under his breath, barely audible. I didn't know." Emma didn't answer. She didn't have to. I realized then that what he was saying wasn't about rules or HOA authority. It was about her. About the truth he hadn't understood until that moment, that my daughter was not someone to be threatened, underestimated, or intimidated. She wasn't just strong. She was trained, disciplined, and deadly if pushed too far. The silence after that was suffocating. I could feel my hands shaking, my knees weak, but Emma stayed perfectly still. Her eyes locked on him, waiting for any sign of further aggression. I couldn't believe the shift that had happened in just minutes. The power dynamic had completely reversed. The man who had come to intimidate us was now terrified, unsure, utterly powerless. Then he did something I never expected. He dropped the gun entirely, letting it clatter to the ground. He stepped back, muttering about misunderstandings and procedures, his words tripping over each other in panic. I could see the humiliation and fear etched across his face. And I realized in that moment that Emma had not just protected Usk, she had flipped the entire situation, changing everything in a way that would leave him shaken for the rest of his life. I rushed forward, my legs finally moving, my voice trembling as I asked Emma, "Are you okay?" She didn't answer immediately. She bent slightly to pick up the gun, inspecting it with a trained eye, then set it safely aside. Finally, she looked at me, her face softening just a little, and said, "I'm fine, Mom, but we're not safe yet." Her words hit me harder than the gun ever could. I realized then that this wasn't just an isolated incident. This man had been emboldened by arrogance, by ignorance, by a sense of authority he didn't earn, and he would likely come back if nothing changed. But I also realized something else. Emma wasn't just my daughter. She was a protector, a force I hadn't fully understood until tonight. And as I looked at her, standing there, calm, but ready for anything, I felt a mix of pride and fear that I couldn't fully put into words. The night was far from over, and I knew that whatever came next, we were no longer just a mother and daughter at home. We were a team facing a danger that none of our neighbors could possibly understand. And this was only the beginning. I barely had time to catch my breath before the front door burst open. The Manauer HOA enforcer lunged forward, perhaps thinking he still had control, but Emma was already moving. She didn't shout, didn't hesitate. One smooth, practiced motion, and he was off balance, stumbling back as she intercepted him effortlessly. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like watching someone in a movie, except this was my daughter, real, fearless, and impossible to intimidate. "Stop," she commanded, her voice low and dangerous. "This ends now, or you leave differently than you came." He froze again. I could see the terror fully take hold in his eyes. He wasn't just afraid of her strength, he was afraid of what he had done. The line he had crossed, the realization that he had underestimated her completely. His arrogance, his sense of authority, it all crumbled in front of me. Then came the moment I'll never forget. He tried to raise his hands as if to surrender, but his panic made him clumsy. His gun, still in his grip, slipped, skidding across the floor with a metallic clatter. I felt my chest tighten. Every nerve in my body screamed that the situation could explode at any second. But Emma.com, as ever, moved faster than I thought possible. She pinned him to the wall with an effortless hold, disarming him completely. And for the first time, I saw a flicker of something I had never seen before in her, not just strength, but controlled fury, righteous and terrifying. I said, "Enough," she whispered. Her eyes locked on his. "You don't get to scare people in their own home. Not me, not my mother. Not anyone." The man's face went pale. He tried to speak, to protest, to justify himself, but his words faltered. Every instinct he had to intimidate, to enforce, to control was gone. He had no idea how close he had come to disaster. I stood frozen, overwhelmed. My heart was racing, my hands shaking. I wanted to run to Emma, to hold her, to tell her how proud I was. But I couldn't move, not because I was afraid, but because I was watching something incredible. My daughter, my little girl, had transformed into someone unstoppable. Finally, he slumped against the wall, defeated, utterly broken. His weapon was useless, his arrogance shattered, his threats meaningless. Emma released him only enough to ensure he couldn't harm us further, keeping him under control until he finally stumbled backward, muttering apologies, and fled down the street. I sank to the floor, my knees weak, finally allowing the adrenaline to hit me. Tears burned in my eyes, not from fear, but from a mix of relief, awe, and overwhelming pride. I had spent years worrying about protecting my daughter. Tonight, she had protected me beyond. She had done it with a skill and strength I could never have imagined. Emma sat down beside me, breathing steadily, finally letting herself relax. "Mom," she said softly, "I told you to trust me." I nodded, still shaking. "I do. I didn't realize. I had no idea." Her gaze softened, though there was still an edge to it. "Most people don't. That's why they make mistakes. But he won't forget this night anytime soon. I can promise you that." I realized she was right. Word would spread through the neighborhood. The HOA, the neighbors, even other enforcers would hear about what happened. And for once, I felt a sense of justice. The man who thought he could intimidate us had been shown exactly what happens when you underestimate someone. But the relief was short-lived. The aftermath was already beginning. Calls were made. The HOA headquarters was buzzing. Our neighbors whispered in disbelief about what had happened. Some were supportive, some horrified, some terrified that a situation like this could happen in their quiet street. Emma and I sat together for what felt like hours, processing everything. I couldn't stop thinking about how quickly things had escalated, how close we had come to tragedy, and how, in the end, it was Emma's courage, her training, and her calm precision that had saved us finally. I asked the question I had been holding back. Emma, why didn't you ever tell me? She looked at me, her expression soft but serious. Because you didn't need to worry. And because people underestimate what they can't see. My job isn't to impress anyone Nits to protect. Her words hit me harder than the gun ever could. Protection, control, strength, all the things I had wanted for her. All the things I had tried to teach her, she had surpassed and transformed into something far greater. That night, the neighborhood would remember the story of the HOA cop who thought he could scare my daughter. But I would remember the truth, the raw, undeniable reality of my daughter's courage. And I knew that our lives, our sense of safety, and even our understanding of each other had changed forever. The danger had passed for Nabet. I could feel it in the quiet moments, in the lingering tension. Things would never be the same. And yet, for the first time, I also knew something that I had never felt before, that no matter what came next, Emma and I could face it together. And somehow, that knowledge, that sense of security, felt more powerful than any fear, any threat, any gun that could ever appear at our door. The next morning, the sun rose over our quiet street, but it felt different, somehow like the air itself had changed. The house was still peaceful in a way it hadn't been the night before, but I could feel the echoes of what had happened lingering in every corner. I poured myself a cup of coffee, hands still trembling slightly, and looked at Emma. She was sitting at the kitchen table, calm and composed, sipping water like nothing had happened. "Mom," she said softly, "you look like you didn't sleep a wink." I sighed and leaned against the counter, thinking about the night's events. My mind replayed it in fragments: the knock, the gun, the standoff, the way she had moved, controlled, and protected us. I had spent so many years worrying about her safety, never imagining she had the strength to protect me instead. And yet, here she was, my daughter, unshaken, unbroken, and more powerful than I could have ever imagined. I just keep thinking about how close it all was. I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. How easily it could have gone wrong. Emma reached over and touched my hand, her fingers steady and warm. "Mom, we were ready. That's what matters. You don't have to be afraid when you trust your instincts. San, trust me." I smiled, though it was a little shaky. Trust, that was the word, the lesson, the change. I had always taught her about caution, about thinking ahead, about the dangers of the world. But she had taught me something just as important last night. Courage isn't just about confronting danger. It's about control, focus, and knowing exactly when to act. The HOA officer, if you could even call him that, now is never seen on our street again. I heard through whispers from neighbors that he had been reprimanded, his authority questioned, and that he would think twice before stepping onto anyone's property with threats in hand. But I didn't care about that. What mattered was that we were safe. And more than that, I realized how much stronger I felt knowing Emma was capable of facing anything. We went outside together, stepping onto our quiet lawn. The sun felt warm on my skin, and for the first time in hours, I could breathe without the tightness in my chest. I looked at Emma standing tall beside me. I felt a swell of pride I could hardly put into words. "You know," I said, my voice soft, "I've always been proud of you. But last night I realized something new. You're not just my daughter, you're something else entirely." She laughed lightly, a sound that was both relieved and confident. I'm still your daughter, she said. But yeah, I've learned a thing or two along the way. It was true. I had spent so much time worrying about the dangers of the world, and yet I had underestimated her. I had underestimated her strength, her training, and her ability to face threats head-on. And in doing so, I had learned an important lesson myself. Courage isn't always visible. Sometimes it's hidden, quiet, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Later that day, we went back inside, and I found myself reflecting on the whole ordeal. Our home, once just a place of comfort, had become a symbol of resilience. The night had tested us, pushed us to the edge, and forced us to confront fear in its rawest form. And yet it had also shown us something incredibly: our capacity to survive, to protect each other, and to grow stronger together. I realized how much we had both changed. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a witness to strength, to courage, to precision under pressure. And Emma, well, she had always been extraordinary, but now I truly understood the depth of her abilities. She wasn't just capable of protecting herself. She could protect anyone, anywhere, from almost anything. And knowing that brought me a sense of peace I had never felt before. As evening fell, we sat together on the porch, the sky painted with colors I barely noticed before. I took her hand in mine and said, I hope you know, I will never underestimate you again. And I hope you never underestimate yourself. She smiled, her eyes glinting with a mixture of relief and quiet pride. I won't, she said, and you don't have to. Not anymore. In that moment, I realized that fear, while powerful, is temporary. Courage, while sometimes hidden, is permanent. And love is the force that allows us to see both in each other, even when the world tries to blind us. The HOA threat was gone, the gun incident behind us, but the lesson lingered. The night had been terrifying, but it had revealed a truth I would never forget. Real strength often comes from those we love most, quietly standing beside us, ready to protect, ready to fight, ready to endure. And as I watched Emma stand there, strong, calm, and unwavering, I knew we could face anything together. The world might throw threats at our doorstep, challenges we cannot anticipate, but we had survived on in surviving. We had grown. I leaned back, taking a deep breath, and whispered to myself, sometimes the people we raise become our heroes. And sometimes, in facing danger, they teach us the most important lesson of all: how to trust, how to believe, and how to be brave even when the world seems determined to frighten us. That night, I went to bed feeling a quiet certainty. We were safe, we were stronger, and we were ready for whatever came next.